Turkey's parliament votes overwhelmingly to launch military operations against Kurdish rebels in northern Iraq. But what will the impact be of any cross-border raid? Will it add to the already messy situation inside war-torn Iraq? This is Inside Story. Hello, I'm Darren Jordan. The Turkish parliament voted on Wednesday to approve military action against Kurdish rebels of the PKK operating from bases in northern Iraq. The move by Ankara greatly complicates the US military effort inside Iraq. The Americans have very few resources left to take on PKK fighters, and it's also a vote that puts mounting pressure on Baghdad and brought swift condemnation from northern Iraq's autonomous Kurds. And our verge has more now on the vote and its wider regional impact.
Kabul 507. Red 19.
The vote was overwhelming. More than 500 members of parliament approved military action against Kurdish separatists, with just 19 opposing it. But Turkish Prime Minister Tayyip Erdogan cautioned that approval does not necessarily mean action.
I sincerely wish that this motion will never be applied. The passage of this motion does not mean an immediate incursion will follow.
But the Iraqi government isn't taking chances. It's calling for Kurdish separatist fighters to leave the country and is calling for diplomacy with Turkey. It's an issue Ankara has been dealing with for years. The PKK, or Kurdistan Workers' Party, was founded in the 1970s. The party's aim? An independent state in the Kurdish area of Turkey, which stretches for more than 300 kilometers along the border with Iraq, and where the Turkish government has several military posts. Kurds make up around 1/5 of the Turkish population, some 12 million people, and the government views a Kurdish separatist movement as a national security threat. The PKK announced a ceasefire in 1998, but then called it off 6 years later and resumed attacks in Turkey. More than 30,000 people have been killed in the conflict since 1984, and the Turkish government accuses the PKK of recent bomb attacks, such as this one in Ankara in May, and one that killed 15 soldiers just last week. The United States says it's attacks like these that make the PKK what it calls a terrorist organization. Despite the label, the United States is urging Turkey not to send its troops into Iraq. Washington views Iraq's Kurdish north as a success story there, and both the American and Iraqi governments fear any Turkish action in Iraq could further destabilize the country.
Well, joining us now, our guests in Ankara, İlnur Çevik. He's the editor-in-chief of the New Anatolian newspaper. In London, Freshta Reiper, member of the Kurdistan National Congress. And in Washington, Dr. Ian Lesser. He's a senior transatlantic fellow. Welcome all to the programme. İlnur Çevik in Ankara. Let me start with you, if I may. I mean, what's your reaction to the vote passed by the Turkish parliament? I mean, how significant is it politically, do you think?
Well, it's very significant because it seems to be where words stop, actions start. This is what the Turkish government has said. This is no time to continue speaking. But then, with international pressure and with contacts from Baghdad, I think more words will be said. But the problem is, of course, as your program showed, the PKK has killed Turkish soldiers. The PKK before that killed civilians. And as the toll mounts, the Turkish public is pressuring the government to do something. And that something the government felt was ordering a cross-border operation, because until now the Turkish government was coming under severe pressure from the Turkish military to allow it to carry out cross-border operations. But the government was resisting until now. Before the elections, the military asked for the government to give it the go-ahead. After the victory in the elections, the government felt it had the upper hand and could tame the military in a way. But after the recent killings, the PKK seemed to be trying to draw Turkey into northern Iraq. I think this is a tactical move on the part of the PKK. They want to force an incursion into northern Iraq so that the international community falls at odds with Turkey. Turkey has a lot of problems with the European Union. Its membership, the issue creates problems for its membership.
Okay, let's
and the United States, of course, has a problem with Turkey.
Okay, let's put that very point to Freshta Raper in London. She's a member of the Kurdistan National Congress. I mean, is there a sense that the PKK want to try and force Turkey's hand? They want to ruin Turkey's relationship, perhaps, with Washington and the EU?
It's absolutely, I don't believe it for 1 second. The whole reason, the whole issue behind what Turkey is doing, I personally cannot wait for Turkey to make such a historical mistake, because by this mistake is not only ruining Turkey as a nation, Turkey as a country as well. There are 25 million Kurd residents live and displaced from Turkey. They have not been recognized, they have not been treated as even a second-hand citizen. For 1 second, even people laugh at 10 soldiers was killed, so we decided to go. What do they gain by a military action apart of more hardship, killing innocent people, displacement, bringing more misery for life for millions and millions of people? For 1 second, if Turkish government think, for 1 moment, if they think, this is not an Ottoman Empire, this is a globalized world, you cannot solve the problem by a military action. And to be honest, the whole issue is not a PKK, is not. There are 2 things behind this. Number one, what is going on in north of Iraq, in the Kurdish region, is Turkey take it as a huge threat for 25 million Kurds, which is they are not even allowed to speak their own language. They are not even allowed to be called as a Kurd. They call them a Turkish mountains. Number 2, this is a direct blackmail from a Turkish government to the American Congress for just about, they are just about to be recognized, the genocide of Armenian could be recognized from a Turkish government. I think the threat and the embarrassment and humiliation of a Turkish government, they try to create something else to cover up what they have done in the past.
Let's get a view from Washington and bring in Dr. Ian Lesser there. I mean, President Bush strongly urged Turkey not to cross the border to go into northern Iraq. I mean, how will this affect the relationship, do you think, with Washington? Because Turkey is very much seen as a key ally.
Well, this is a long-standing issue between Turkey and the United States. In fact, it goes back to the Clinton administration when Turkey launched a number of large-scale cross-border operations into northern Iraq after the first Gulf War. This is something where the United States feels very strongly that Turkey taking on more of a military role in northern Iraq is going to complicate an already complicated situation in Iraq. So we've argued strongly against it. A lot of analysts in Washington, a lot of strategists would argue that the United States should have been tougher with the PKK, should have done more demonstrative things in cooperation with Turkey to work on the PKK issue to contain this. This is a very violent group that has done a lot of very violent things in Turkey, and the Turkish public opinion is extremely frustrated and angered by this. The discussion you've had so far points out quite correctly that Turkey has its own difficulties with the Kurdish issue inside the country. But this has changed tremendously over the past years, and the PKK is in some ways a very anachronistic organization that the US and Turkey view as a terrorist organization. Okay, so the United States is naturally going to prefer a political solution, but Turkey may not be stoppable at this point.
It's an interesting point you make. Let's bring in back Ilna Çevik there in Ankara. Is this a defining moment, do you think, for Turkish-US relations? Now, how much do you think this is a big warning sign, perhaps, to the Americans and to the Kurds in northern Iraq?
Well, it's a very big warning. You see, Turkey has asked the United States, as the occupying power in Iraq, to do something about the PKK. They couldn't. It asked the Baghdad government to do something. They couldn't. So Turkey is saying, look, I mean, something has to be done. These people are based in northern Iraq. They are getting a free ride there. They are being trained there. And then they slip into Turkey, do their terrorist acts, and come back. So somebody has to do something about it. And just a minute ago, the good honorable lady says, There are 25 million displaced Kurds. I mean, this is utter rubbish. In Turkey, we have 19 deputies in the Turkish parliament elected through the Kurdish ticket. And there are 150 deputies out of the 550 seat parliament who are of Kurdish origin. I mean, the Kurds have their rights in Turkey, and with the Reformation movement, because of the European Union, the Kurds have got more rights in the past 4 years.
Okay, well,
and I have been one of the persons who has been struggling for it. But you see, the United States, everybody says that because of the genocide, Turkey is angered and is doing this to the United States. That is completely wrong.
All right,
even without the genocide resolution, Turkey would have done this, would have passed this motion.
Okay, let's just get another thought there from Fresh Raper in London. I mean, the message that Ilnur Çevik in Ankara seems to be saying that that if the US-backed Iraqi government doesn't clamp down on the PKK rebels who use bases inside northern Iraq, then they'll do it themselves.
So what do they gain? I just want to ask them, you bring a huge scale of military, you bring all these bombs, all these shells, you're going to bombard all these innocent villages, all these people. Who are they going to kill? An innocent people. What do they achieve? Why do they tell they are a terrorist? And with regard with the American, they say they are a terrorist and they done bad thing. Why don't we go to the history of Turkey? From 1925, when the first village was erased, every single man was beheaded, and the Turkish general has to bring the head back to the general to make sure which one is a terrorist act. Is this I don't for one moment, not only PKK, not even any other nation, I do not agree with a revolution, with a gun involved, with any sort of type. I do not agree with them. But at the same time, I am sympathetic by Turkey refused to listen to them. Turkey's refused to communicate with not only them, the whole entire Kurd. Yeah, we have collaborators in Iraq. We had a Kurdish collaborator with Saddam Hussein. There are many Kurdish collaborators in Turkey as well, which is they don't do anything. There are the highest numbers of illiteracy on people are illiterate in Turkey. Who put them in that situation?
Okay.
For one moment, if Turkish government realize why they do, what they do to the Kurdish population in Turkey is going to be a big punchback to the Kurdish government one day.
All right, Fresh Raper, listen, we have to take a short break now. We'll come back to you in a second. But when we come back, we assess the ongoing Kurdish struggle for political rights and, of course, its regional impact. Stay with us.